Okay, in this video we're going to take a look at this Ezekiel 38 and 39 reference right here. This passage or set of passages is actually referred to as the War of Gog and Magog, and we can get into that a little bit later in terms of why it's called both, but let's go back. We'll read through parts of these two chapters. One of the troubles we're going to have in this short video is that these are probably some of the most famous prophecies from the Old Testament, and again, references like Psalm 83 did, people groups from way back in the early biblical days. And so understanding who the people groups are, which there's a lot of consensus on, but understanding those people groups and then taking a look at all the passages, and it's two full chapters, way beyond the scope of what could be done here in a short video, but we'll try and go through enough of it just so that you can get a sense of why do people think that this is such an important and near prophecy about to be fulfilled. So let's head over to Bible Gateway. Okay, here we're in Bible Gateway again. Um, this time I moved to the New American Standard Bible, and that might frustrate everybody because I'd been using the English Standard Version. One of the reasons for this is it's a little bit more descriptive in this translation about the first set of people groups mentioned, and we can talk about why there's a debate between the versions, but for now I'm just going to choose the New American Standard, and it doesn't really change in total the interpretation of the passage. So let's hit a couple of these verses, and by no means are we going to get through all of the verses. And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face toward Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. I will turn you about and put hooks into your jaws, and I will bring you out, and all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them splendidly attired, a great company with bucklers and shield, and all of them wielding swords, Persia, Ethiopia, and put with them all of them with shield and helmet, Gomer and all of its troops, Beth Togarmah from the remote parts of the north, with all the troops and many peoples with you. So first thing we want to do is just get the translation of these people groups out of the way as best as possible. These people groups, I believe it was Genesis 10. It's part of the early records in Genesis of what happened just after Noah's flood, and Noah's sons and the different lineage off of the sons of Noah. And one of the issues in the interpretation of the passage is at what point was Ezekiel referencing these people groups? Was it right after the sons and descendants were born, in which case most of them would have been in the area surrounding Turkey or Asia Minor as it was called? Or is it after some of the migrations had occurred and these people groups became tribes in different parts of the Central Asia, Russia, and the Middle East? And so that's part of the interpretation challenge, but luckily this prophecy has been famous for decades and decades, and there's been a lot of work done in terms of who these people groups are. So I'm going to go over the Watchman Bible Study. Dr. Chuck Missler and a bunch of folks, this Dr. Mark Hitchcock, have participated in creating this, it looks like, and so that's good enough for me, and I'm going to use it. In Ezekiel's prophecy, Russia's changing demographics, the prophet Ezekiel predicted almost 2,600 years ago that Rosh, modern-day Russia, would lead an end-time invasion of Israel. The allies of Russia in the invasion are ancient places today, are Central Asia, referenced there in Magog, Iran, which is Persia, Libya, which is Put, Turkey, which is Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, and Togarmah, said that wrong, Togarmah, and Sudan, which is Kush, all of which are Islamic nations. So there's our decoding, and as we said before, the first in a list is usually the leader of the group. And so here what we're seeing is the Prince of Rosh, which was interpreted as Russia, Meshech, and Tubal. So one of the debates between these different versions, and don't get caught up in this if you go off on your own Bible study and you see in the English Standard Version or other versions, Rosh is left out. Rosh in ancient Hebrew is head or first. It means head or first. And so what the debate around this has been is this Prince of Rosh, is it supposed to be, the leader, the head leader of Meshech and Tubal, or is the prince named of the prince of the area of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal? Regardless of this debate and others, you have Russia coming into and leading the alliance with these other um, people groups. And the second one on the list is Persia, which up until I think it was the 1930s, Iran was called Persia. So now you have Russia in alliance with Persia, and then you have Ethiopia and whatever listed here, and we learned that is Turkey, and we have Libya, and we have some of the Sudan and some of the northern countries in Africa. And if you look, as the article said, other than Russia, all of these are groups of Islamic nations that are outright hatred of Israel. But they don't border on Israel's border like we saw in Psalm 83. So this looks like it's a huge invasion coming with Russia and whatever. And all the alliances politically in the current day are there between Russia and Iran and Turkey. All these nations are linked, both economically and politically are already linked. And so people get very excited about this becoming a near-term fulfillment. Bunches and bunches of books have been written about this, both fiction and nonfiction, from Joel Rosenberg, and he's a New York Times bestseller. So this has been in the news, and you probably couldn't have missed it. You would have had to have looked the other way to not see books on this topic. Okay, so let's come down here and just take a look at a couple of the more important phrases as we pass through. After many days you will be summoned. In the latter years you will come into a land that's restored from the sword, whose inhabitants have been gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel. So here we go again. If we look back at the prior references about the super sign of Israel being regathered, we talked about in the earlier video series. I talked about in Ezekiel 34, it begins to reference this, and in Ezekiel 35 and Ezekiel 36, it references again. Ezekiel 37, it's all about the regathering again. Matter of fact, in Ezekiel 37, if you read, there's very descriptive passage. It's written in sort of a dreamlike state, but you can definitely see that the people are being restored from Holocaust-like conditions. And as we talked in the earlier video series, prophecy is just generally it's a narrative, or the sequence of events are linear, typically, just like you were telling a story, but it happens to be about events in the future. And so if in Ezekiel 37 you have the Jewish people returning from Holocaust-like conditions to Israel, then in 38, if you're talking about a big war, it sort of helps you sequence some of these events, and that's why this looks like it's a near-term fulfillment coming up. Other big issue here is the nations, and they're living securely, all of them, and we'll see reference again down here in 10, living in unwalled villages, and the Israels are at rest, that live securely. Well, that's one of the problems currently, is that there's by no stretch could you say that Israel's living in unwalled villages and securely and at peace. All their neighbors hate them. There's a 403-mile wall separating them from the Palestinians because of all the suicide bombings back a decade ago or so. And so something has to happen to rid Israel or a peace covenant or something of the threat coming from all the neighbors so that they live securely and they take the walls down and they're not worried about suicide bombers. So a lot of people think that Psalm 83 fits that criteria because all the neighbors, if they get put down in the way that it appears in that psalm, it allows the Jews to feel comfortable because all of the people that hate them, that currently border them, will have been eliminated, and actually their borders will have expanded some. So there's just logic trying to sequence some of these passages together. But again, you definitely see all the current surrounding neighbors hate Israel, and here you see this broader alliance of countries that are predominantly Muslim wanting to come in and with huge armies and trying to defeat Israel. Okay. Here we have a reference. Again, the armies will come from your place out of the remote parts of the north, and many peoples with you, all of them in a great assembly, a mighty army. So again, where's the remote parts of the north? If you draw straight up from Israel, you hit Russia. Russia, of course, and Iran here in the league, it definitely would have great armies. So this perfectly fits today. Another little factoid is Russia's never been in alliance with Iran going back through history, or Persia going back through history. And so again, it feels like it's a current day kind of a prophecy because the conditions around this alliance have never existed in all of history, and yet it does today. And so again, we have the current day events lining up with this to a T. Okay, here's another little part. It shall come about in the last days that I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me when I am sanctified through you before their eyes. Trying to come down here and catch. Okay. My servants, the prophets of Israel, who prophesied in those days for many years that I'll bring you against them. It will come to pass in that day when God comes against the land of Israel, declares the Lord, that my fury will mount up in my anger, and my zeal in my blaring wrath declare on that day there will surely be a great earthquake in the land of Israel, the fish of the sea, the birds. This is going to be God and not the armies of Israel coming against this invading army. And so again, helping us sequence these a little bit, in Psalm 83, we saw the petition to have the Israel armies fight against the neighbors, and they reference it just like in the days of Gideon fighting against the neighbors. Now this is something totally different. This is God saying when these huge armies come in to invade Israel, he's going to take care of it, and you see these supernatural events take place. Okay. Down here toward the bottom, after all these hailstones, brimstones, they're completely wiping out the invading armies and actually the land that they came from. I will magnify myself, sanctify myself, and make myself known in sight of many nations, and they will know that I am the Lord. So one of the key things about this is this passage and other passages talk about Israel coming back into their land, but they're in a state of apostasy. The majority of the people, not all of them, but the majority don't really believe in God. They're coming back as cultural Jews and not as God-fearing Jews. And so there's an implication here when God destroys this huge invading army that would have completely taken Israel out. When God saves them, part of the purpose is to demonstrate to them that he's real, and he has historically been watching over them, and he is the one that takes down this impossible size, this invading army. Okay. And here we can see that he's going to send fire on the land of Magog. So he's not only going to take care of the armies, he's going to go back and he's going to take out the places that they came from. Okay. Here's a real significant set of passages, and we move down quite a ways in this prophecy. On that day I'll give Gog a burial ground there in Israel in the valley of those who pass by east of the sea. That's probably the Dead Sea. And it will block off those who pass by, so that they will bury Gog there with all of his horde, and they will call it the Valley of Ham and Gog. For 7 months the house of Israel will be burying them in order to cleanse the land. Even all the people on the land will bury them. And it will be to their renown on the day that I glorify myself, declares the Lord. They will set apart men who will constantly pass through the land, burying those who are passing through, even those left on the surface of the ground, in order to cleanse it. At the end of 7 months they will make a search as those who pass through the land, and through though anyone that sees a man's bone, then he will set a marker by it until the buriers have buried it in the valley of Ham and Gog, and they will even the name of the city will be Hamona, so that they will cleanse the land. So this is just really an amazing reference. If you look at it, they're not avoiding touching these dead bodies or these bones and setting up flags because they don't want to get ceremonially unclean. Remember, they're returning, the Jewish people are returning in a state of apostasy. And this God doing this retribution is to wake them up. What this is really looking like is there's some event, whether it's the promised pestilence that God is sending, or very probably biological or radiological, like a nuclear bomb, as part of this war that's occurred. And what you've got all these dead bodies now that nobody can touch, and a special team of cleaners has to come by, and wherever there's a bone with a flag by it, the special team of cleansers cleanse the land. It's very hard to say that this doesn't have to be in a latter day event, because there was no such thing as nuclear weapons or biological or radiological weapons back when these passages were written back in the 600 BC. Definitely this fits a modern day kind of a treatment. So again, it's just amazing what's in the Bible if you actually go dig through and study. Then we have a rather kind of a gross reference that there'll be birds and beasts of every kind that will eat the flesh of all these dead bodies. And just one other anecdote, that there are birds that eat dead flesh, not carnivore, carrion birds, have actually been amassing in Israel. I guess historically they've flown through, but now they're actually nesting in Israel and populating. And some people say, wow, look at that. It looks like a preparation for this passage fulfillment right here. Okay, and then the Lord will have mercy and restore his house, and he'll be jealous for his name. He will forget their disgrace and all their treachery, which they perpetrated against God, and they'll live securely. And so this is, again, it's referencing he'll be bringing back the people from all the lands of their enemies. He will sanctify them in the sight of many nations. So this is a reference to the millennial reign. The Jews will be back in their land, which they're moving back to their land today. So amazing prophecy. You can open up any website out of the Middle East. Let's say Jerusalem Post is jpost.com or ynetnews.com, and you can see elements of these relationships and alliances starting. You can see the various things in terms of threats of nuclear war or biological war. This is all setting stage right now.